It amazes me to think that even though I have built my entire channel based on Black Ops 4, I haven't actually made a video talking about why I love this game so much. And of course, sure, there are things that I don't enjoy as well. We're going to be talking about both of the things here in this video. So sit back and enjoy a top 10 list of the things that I really enjoyed in BO4 and perhaps wish would return in future CODs. Maybe one day, fingers crossed, maybe we'll get a remastered version of the game. Highly unlikely, but it's still possible. At number 10, I would have to say just the sheer amount of stuff that you can do within just this one game. You have multiplayer, after that you have league play, which is kind of like a spin-off of multiplayer, just the competitive side of that. Then you have Blackout/Battle Royale. After that you have, of course, zombies. And we're going to get more in depth into each of these and what makes them so good. It's not just quantity, of course, it's the quality of each of these game modes that for me personally, I could go from multiplayer playing that for several hours, 3 or 4 hours plus. Once I got bored of that, I could then move on over to Battle Royale if I wanted to kind of relax a little bit, play a couple games of that. From there, I could go play zombies for an hour or two and then make my way all the way back to multiplayer/league play if I so desired. And so I guess the takeaway for this number 10 spot is that there's just a lot of content that keeps the player engaged. You have a lot of game modes wrapped up into one game that for $60, even though it's not $60 anymore, you really get your money's worth. At number 9, the lack of campaign. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself. You're saying, how is this actually a pro? But for me personally, I am not someone who thinks that having a story is important to the game's success. And if you know anything about the production side of BO4, it came down to, okay, how many modes can we actually put into the game? And campaign just didn't make the cut. As mentioned, there's a lot of different game modes that the game does have, and implementing a campaign just wasn't a possibility. And I agree with their decision to keep campaign out of it in exchange for Battle Royale, in exchange for zombies, of course, in exchange for multiplayer. The truth of the matter is that campaign just does not have the replayability. It is a very scripted, it is literally the most scripted game mode that you could ask for. It's a single player mode, although I'm sure that there would be co-op. And you only really play the campaign maybe once, maybe twice if you're going for achievements or helping a friend, or if it's really, really good. But after that, you play at most 10 hours of the campaign, and then you're done with it, and you're probably never going to touch it again for like another 5, 10 plus years. My perspective is I agree with their decision. I'm glad that they cut campaign because all of these other game modes have an infinite amount more of replayability as opposed to campaign, which again, you only play through about once. At number 8, let's go ahead and talk about Battle Royale/Blackout. I gotta be honest with you guys, I don't have all the time in the world to actually go in depth into Blackout, but what I can tell you is that Blackout is very, very good for what it is, and I don't think that you could really compare Warzone to Blackout like a lot of people tend to do. And we've all heard the saying, Blackout walked so Warzone could run. I disagree with that. I think that they're so different, in fact, that I don't think that you can compare the two. I like Blackout for what it was and for what it is, and I like Warzone for what it was and for what it is. But kind of putting Warzone to the side, I think Warzone will be remembered as the better Battle Royale, as the fan favorite, but there will always be a cult-like following for Blackout. Now let's talk about Blackout for a second. The weapon balancing was exceptional, pretty divine. The armor system was good. The map itself was really good, very immersive. I felt like I was, just really enjoyed the map. I can't stress that enough. Just everything about Blackout was actually pretty good, and I can't really think of anything to complain about, which is also a very good sign. The fun factor was also very high as well. Number 7, let's go ahead and talk about zombies. Now, my favorite map that I have ever played in zombies history is Dead of the Night. What an incredible map, and it breaks my heart to think that a lot of you guys will never get the chance to play it because there's a paywall there. You have to pay for the DLC. But if I'm being completely honest here, the $20 that I spent to get the DLC for BO4, just zombies, of course, not the multiplayer maps, the $20 that I spent to play the zombies DLC, exceptional. Dead of the Night is my favorite zombies map of all time that I have ever played. But if we take a look objectively at all the maps in BO4, I can't think of a single one that was bad. And in fact, I really enjoy the theme and the atmosphere of every single zombies map in BO4. And by the way, IX9, that is an instant classic, whether you're a part of the zombies community or not, whether you're just a filthy casual like me in the zombies community. IX is an instant classic and will be remembered as one of the best maps, objectively speaking, of all time. It is very good. While we're still talking about the maps here, my second favorite map in the game is going to be Ancient Evil. Again, another DLC map, and if you haven't tried it, man, does that suck. You really have to. Ancient Evil and Dead of the Night, two of my favorite maps. You really got to try it, guys. But what about the gameplay? As far as the gameplay is concerned, I genuinely enjoy the gameplay. It's pretty good. Now, I do wish that I had more time to go in depth on talk about zombies, but as far as the gameplay is concerned, the maps, everything about zombies, I love. It's a little easier than I think other COD games. You kind of automatically get Juggernog, and I think the zombies community didn't appreciate that. But what I can tell you guys is I had nothing to complain about. The maps were good, and the gameplay was good. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about the innovation, because there's a lot of innovation in BO4. And this is where we focus our attention more so on the multiplayer / league play side of things, so pubs and competitive. This is where we get into the meat and potatoes of the review. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about innovation. Number one, I'd have to say that the stim shot, this was the first time that it was introduced into COD, and I gotta tell you guys, I wasn't a big fan at first of the stim shot. It took me some time to get used to, but once I got used to it, the stim shot system and having to manually heal, even if you didn't run stim shot in your gear, you still had to manually heal. And for all of us, I mean literally all of us, whether you were new to COD or you had been a veteran, this was a learning curve. None of us were used to having to manually heal. We all had to wait 3 to 5 seconds before we could re-chow and re-peak, and this was a new concept. From my perspective, it takes a lot more skill to force the players to manually heal. You put the control in the player's hands. No longer does a player just sit back and wait that standard 3 to 5 seconds, wait for them to get their health back, and then they can reach out. Instead, you give the player the freedom to decide what exactly they're going to do when they're weak. This also means that in a fraction of a second, you could take damage, and then a fraction of a second later, you can heal and then go back out there and reach out. It makes for a much more fast-paced gameplay, which I obviously favor. This is something that we typically tend to not think about. Why is this game so much more fast-paced than other COD games? Well, the stim shot system and forcing the player to manually heal is a big part of it. It creates for a much more fast-paced environment. I love that. I wish that they would force players to heal more in other games. Going along with my point as far as innovation is concerned, I think that they weren't afraid to make mistakes, because there are some mistakes that they did make with specialists. I think we could all agree with that. However, overall, specialists and how they function, it's not a perfect system by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's actually kind of annoying, some of the specialists and the abilities that they have, but I don't even care. The fact that they did something different, I know they existed in BO3, but it was a new system. There was a lot of nuances there that they changed, and I'm glad that they decided to, instead of go with the status quo, they changed things. I love that. And this brings me to my next point at number 5, is that they were not afraid to experiment. They weren't afraid to make mistakes. There was a lot of mistakes. We could go ahead and go on and talk about all the things that was wrong with specialists, all the things that was wrong with the game, and we will kind of touch on that briefly perhaps in this video, maybe not. But I can tell you guys right now is I absolutely appreciate the fact that they actually changed the formula. This was a COD game that I don't think that will ever have. This is a unique COD game. We will probably never ever have a COD game like this ever again. So if you got to live it and appreciate it while it was at its peak, while it was really hitting, man, this was such a fun, good time. Next up at number 4, let's go ahead and talk about the weapon balancing. For the most part, I am very happy with the weapon balancing in this game. Yes, the VMP does exist. Yes, the micro does exist. But generally speaking, I would actually say that the weapon balancing in BO4, even if I'm not biased, this is the gold standard. So I've got a challenge for you. The next time that you load up into this game, that lobby that you get into, I want you to take note of what everybody in your lobby is using weapon-wise, and what you'll find is that everybody is using a different weapon for the most part. You may have that 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 at the most, using a VMP, but generally what you will find is that people are not afraid to run whatever they feel the most comfortable with. You'll find people using the Cordite. You'll find another person using the GKS. You'll find another person using the ICR. You'll find another person using a Maddox and a SOG, and that is the gold standard for weapon balancing. That is exactly what every game developer should push for in their games. I wish I had more time to talk about the weapon balancing. I certainly don't have all the time in this video to do it, but what I can tell you guys right now is that every weapon feels like it has its own unique personality, and genuinely, I think that everybody can identify with that unique personality of a weapon. There's a weapon for everybody in BO4, and again, just going to the idea that this is the gold standard for weapon balancing, this is it right here. Everybody can identify with the weapon, and that's a really cool idea. Next up at number 3, let's talk about the maps. As for League play, I would have to say, competitively speaking, every map in rotation for League play or CDL or competitive COD was a straight banger. I love Seaside, I love Frequency, Arsenal. They were all very good and very competitively viable. For me personally, I actually really enjoyed the standard 3-lane map system in this game. I know some of you guys thought it was kind of boring, but for me personally, I really enjoy the way that those maps flow and feel. I would hate to compare this game to Modern Warfare, but what I can tell you about Infinity Ward's map design is that they tend to favor asymmetrical chaos, and I think that it overwhelms the players. I don't enjoy the way they develop their maps. I much prefer the 3-lane symmetrical maps. They flow and play so much better, competitively speaking, and to go a step further, I think they just play better, casually speaking, too. Next up, at number 2, let's go ahead and talk about the movement. We all know that this is not an advanced mobility game. However, all we have is sprint and slide, and yet when you combine the way that sprint and slide functions in this game, what you get is this absolutely amazing, beautiful symmetry that you can just do things with those two things alone that you couldn't do in other COD games that also have sprint and slide. If that doesn't make any sense to you, all I'm trying to say is that even though that there was just sprint and slide, there was so much that you can do with just sprint and slide. And sure, we did talk earlier about how fast-paced the game is, but this is aided to the player because, in part, due to the movement. There are a whole bunch of different things at play here. We do have things like the stim shot and the manual healing system, but the movement also, of course, allows the player to play fast-paced and aggressive, which I love so much. This is something that I think is another gold standard if they want to develop another fast-paced and aggressive COD game like this one. Now, as we get to number 1, I really hope that I'm not missing anything here. If I do, I will be sure to leave it in the notes in the comment section because there's just so many things that I love about this game that I don't want to miss a single thing. But for number 1 would have to be the continued competitive community support and the casuals community support. The key word here is continued. It's mind-boggling to me to see just how long this game has lived. Genuinely, COD games don't last that long. They tend to have the shelf life of, let's say, 6 months, and that's even kind of long for some people. And yet, going into year 4, you have a whole lot of people that are still playing, still streaming, still making content on the game, which I don't think that we've ever really had this outside of, let's say, BO3, BO2, and MW2. This is pretty interesting. And whether you are a competitive player, whether you enjoyed the game competitively speaking, or you're a casual player, a pub stomper perhaps, the continued support from both sides is impeccable to me. And this is something that I'm really keeping my eyes on the game, watching to see what happens going into year 4. Is the community going to continue to support the game as we move into Vanguard? Is that going to be the case? Because like you, I have been sitting back and watching as we went from year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3, and now going into year 4 and watching the community support it for as long as it has when the COD community doesn't really have that kind of relationship with the games. And what I mean is that there really isn't a sense of loyalty there outside of the classics, BO1, BO2, MW2 perhaps. The loyalty just doesn't really exist. Each year, all the fanboys, they pay for their $60 update, they move on, they probably don't touch the game for God knows how long, if they ever, and they just move on with their life and just leave it behind them. But this game was different, and that is the takeaway for number 1. I will be making another video talking about the community based around this game, how much I appreciate the community, how much I love the game, and the memories that I've made on the game. I know I said that a lot, but I will be making a video on the matter, and I just really appreciate you guys for sticking through to the end. Certainly not everybody will. If you did enjoy the video, drop a like, and if you're interested in joining a Discord community based around this game solely, and there are other people who enjoy other games too, myself included, I love all sorts of games, that link will be in the description. We would love to have you there. And again, I appreciate your support on the channel and for sticking through to the end. I'm out of time. Drop a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content and want to get more content just like this every day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.